Well, welcome to another episode of Off the Fence. I'm not going to sing it. I'm not going to dance around it.
Thank you for saying it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Well,
we took a little bit of break for those of you who watch regularly or listen regularly. Christmas happened and sickness happened, and so we just took a little pause. We're not leaving you. We're not abandoning you. But this episode, we wanted to talk about happiness.
yes.
Katy brought up some things with me, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Shared some articles with me. Anyways, so we're going to talk about happiness
Yes.
and think about, I think, in the context of being off the fence. And when you think about when you're on the fence, oftentimes it's literally as simple as, I'm not happy. I don't know why. And this pursuit of happiness,
Yes.
we kind of just stay on the fence and we sit
Yes.
there until we get happy again. So I'll let you open up with what.
A word of prayer. No. Sorry. Every meeting I'm at, that's where we start. So that's where my brain went. Well, so it's funny because so many of the conversations I'm having are with that. And I was just traveling. I actually brought it with me. This was the headline of one of the, I love reading, especially when I'm
For
traveling.
those who are just listening, what are you holding on?
I'm going to tell them it's, it's Time Magazine. And the topic is the secrets, or the front cover is the secrets of happiness experts. At the same little stop, Bo calls them airplane or airport grocery stores, but they're like the little convenience stores. At the same airport grocery store, I got The Economist, which is Exit Wave, how China's reopening will disrupt the world economy. So like lots of like, hey, be happy. The world is ending.
China's coming to get you.
There's just a lot of things that we're taking in, but also having a lot of conversations with people as, again, I think there's still some rhythm resets happening from the last few years, and people really hopeful for things that aren't working out. And what does our happiness hinge on? What even is happiness? It's such a subjective term. But this American way of happiness, one of the studies that I read was saying that the world, so a bunch of different countries, not America, were just asked questions about Americans, and one of the things was that they reported was evidence shows that people across the globe think that Americans are the happiest people, but also simultaneously the angriest people. That's their perception of them, whether or not they know an American, and that's really interesting. So talking about the American way of happiness, so what I sent you was just something that I thought was interesting, but we talk about in the Declaration of Independence as Americans, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't define it, but it says the pursuit, and everybody has a different bend on that. I wanted to, I think happiness becomes the holy grail of our culture. Like I think from the time that we're little and all of those princess movies I watched growing up, happily ever after.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, happiness means everything's going well. I've achieved the goals that I've wanted. Nobody's mad at me. But really getting to the root of what do we know happiness to be? So there was a TED Talk, right? And the younger generation, I think it's been proven that happiness for them is to get rich and become famous.
Yeah.
And there's a Jim Carrey. Now, I'm not sure he's a believer. I don't know if he's walking with Jesus, but it's actually a quote that I sent to Hayden once when Hayden was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And it says, Jim Carrey says, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see it's not the answer. So that's just how I wanted to frame it, walking through what does the world tell us happiness is? Because I do think it's the holy grail. Oh, I just want you to be happy. Or if things are wrong, it's because I'm not happy. So this TED Talk, you watched it too. Do you want to, I'm like a squirrel. Do you want to articulate it a little better than me?
No, I think when you, and this is specifically for us as Americans, whether we want to or not, we're surrounded by this concept. It's built into us that happiness, whether you agree with it or not, it feels like the main goal.
Yes.
And so whether you like the people, you be no, that's wrong. That's not good. That's not what I'm going for. But even though you can say that, there's still a pressure in your world that you may not think it's the most important thing, but you still should try to be happy and happy.
Yes.
And we have these moments, these blips of happiness, whether it's just a good movie or a good meal, good conversation, good weather, whatever. And you're like, I'm happy. Like, and it feels
all of
good.
your flights are on time. We've experienced that a lot lately. Where
So I like to listen to TED Talks, and one of them was a Harvard study of adult development. And the interesting part of this study, because you hear study, you're like, it can be very skewed. This is considered one of the longest human behavior studies that has ever been done. It is actually, when you think of someone who started the study, it had to be handed off because it's gone over 75 years.
That's awesome. I love that.
So because it's been over 75 years, you actually have different people leading the study, which helps a little bit go, okay, this is not just one person's agenda to skew something. This is also not just one decade of stuff. So 75-year study, 724 men were studied. Here's the details. Every year, each man's life was tracked. Questions about every aspect of those 724 men were asked. There were two primary groups they started with. One was a group of sophomores at Harvard College.
Okay.
So for those listening, if you have any stereotypes or assumptions about a college male sophomore at Harvard, you're probably right. Harvard's expensive. Harvard's difficult to get into. Harvard is considered an elite Ivy League university. That's one group. They were studied. The other group was boys from Boston's poorest, most troubled neighborhoods. So I just I want people getting saying like they were attempting to get the opposite, like living situation, living environment. So all the variables around individuals, what surrounded them, they were going to study these two groups of men, 724 of them. They interviewed these guys in their homes. That even along the way, they obtained medical records of each of these people. They did brain scans. They drew blood. They eventually, once they got married, would video them talking to their spouses. So if this study, exhaustive over 75 years of just watching people from different neighborhoods, different demographics, different socioeconomic situations, everything being very, very radically different, and just watching them, studying them scientifically in the sense of from their blood work to their emotions and everything. And they learned a lesson, a primary lesson, a leading lesson out of all of that. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier. The defining thing they learned was it wasn't the amount of money that these individuals had. It wasn't, listen, it actually wasn't, had they experienced racism, had they experienced rejection, had they experienced starvation, had they experienced all the privileges in life where you had all the money, you never even thought about money, you had so much money, you had incredible multiple homes and cars, and none of that was the factor. The factor was their social connectedness, and they learned that loneliness is actually proven to be toxic. And so I thought that was so fascinating when we talk about happiness, and how someone right now is going, well, this would make me happy. The longest study that we can track and the most recent study that we can track would say your answer to your lack of happiness is most likely loneliness. It's not any of the other pieces that you might think would fix
like the
it.
temporary day-to-day, like the weather's bad or my flight got delayed, because I do think a lot of that, we make assumptions that we're letting that dictate our feelings. But you're right. I think happiness there's a deeper element to that, of togetherness.
It sounds, even saying it though is frustrating because I feel like it's even a lesson that like we just naturally begin to learn as kids, is that friends are awesome. not having friends is the opposite of awesome. How it feels so, whether it's scary at times or sad at times, it's like saying, hey, your loneliness is contributing to your unhappiness. It's like, well, of course it is.
Well, but on the flip side, though, I would say that the largest majority of conflict in our lives is because of our relationships. And so that there may be people out there weighing, well, I might not be as happy as I could be, but at least I don't have the conflict that I would have if I had relationships. Like people kind of navigating it that way. Where that, but ultimately, clearly, we know that we're not supposed to be alone, that we're better together.
So if you're unhappy right now, the study, and by the way, I feel like I should say this. I feel like I live in a disclaimer world. It's really annoying and it makes me unhappy.
Unhappy.
Oftentimes if I'll use an illustration, people will interpret me as backing that individual's every decision they've ever made. And it's not. I just think we can learn from anyone and everyone. Frankly, I teach my kids life lessons, talking to them about the devil. So I think there's lessons learned from everyone, good, bad, however you decide. It's not that we're condoning anyone. However, so there's your disclaimer. Anyways, I think this study reveals why we aren't happy. Do I think that God suggests anywhere that we should try to get happy? That you should, God talks about joy, not happiness as much. However, I think it's a genuine emotion that God created and is good. And if right now you just lack happiness, I don't think that God's like, good, I'm so happy that you're unhappy. I think if you don't have happiness, the lesson in this is to think about how's your relational intelligence working out? Like on what are you doing about relationships and loneliness? And instead of dwelling on the diagnosis you may have just gotten, or the financial hit you may have taken, or how someone didn't acknowledge you in a certain way that you wish they had, or just stress or this or that, or how busy you are, or whatever, that when you're unhappy, your first thought needs to think about, am I disconnected? Am I disconnected from people? Am I disconnected from God? Is a relational disconnect that's occurring that I need to work on reconnecting?
Well, because I think that's so true. And when we are feeling that lack of happiness, we tend to gravitate towards things that make us feel temporarily happy, whether that's drinking or shopping or eating, or we just go to those temporary things instead of the source of everything, which is the Lord. Ecclesiastes, there was chapter 2, 10 through 11. I love it because the narrator, it's like a laundry list of every angle that he's come from. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. And I think about that a lot because it is, I think you're right. It's purposeful relationships. We want a meaningful life. And I think that's a life of purpose and a life of engagement. Oftentimes that happiness, I think you're right to ask, what am I doing to lean in to the Lord or to others? I love that.
Yeah, what we know is that our relationships affect our bodies and our brains. They affect how we think, how we're seeing things. And I go back to, that statement that in our Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that's awesome. I wish, and they wouldn't have known this at the time, life, liberty, and the pursuit of being connected to people. And God. Yeah, the value of relationship. We see the word happiness, like I've got this right here on my iPad, that I see the word happiness, and when you see the word happiness, you don't see what's behind that, what's producing that. And I think I think most of our lives, that's what happens. We don't have what we crave. So we think it's all about what we crave, and it's not.
For sure. Well, and then if any little thing goes wrong, we just tip right over. And I think that's what's so powerful also about having connection to the Lord and to people around us, because they can help prop us back up. Because we just blow with the wind, and then find ourselves agitated or frustrated or just forlorn during things that shouldn't be that big of a deal. Man,
Yes.
that's a powerful study. I would love for them to research 724 women too, because I don't think we would be all that different, but I would be very fascinated to see how that would go.
Yeah, and from what I listened to and studied, the study continues, and it begins to reveal, I think, in us that a lot of our cravings were built in us by a creator.
Yes.
And you go all the way back to Genesis, where the detailed account of creation, that God recognizes it was not good for man to be alone. And it's like, how profound that is in Scripture, where you're like, that is a bigger deal than we treat it. And I think we live in a world now, I'm guilty of it, where I avoid talking on the phone because texting is faster and easier. All that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, am I missing out on some relational connection that is affecting my level of happiness just simply because I just don't feel connected? And yeah.
One of the things that I noted was self-help books, which largely are trying to help people feel better about themselves or life. Around 10 million copies of those are sold each year.
Oh my goodness.
Which is wild, which tells you, and I don't think self-help books are bad. I don't think it's bad to want to improve yourself, but it shows you too that we're craving more and better, when a lot of times we already know the information, we're just not necessarily applying it. And that's the truth in relationships, where I think a lot of times it's avoided because it's just challenging. And anytime you're connecting with people, it can be challenging, or we've been wounded in the past or whatever.
Yeah.
But just leaning out and having people around you and with you is so critical. And that's what I love about being part of a church, is that we get to do that. We get to help people connect to each other and to the Lord. And that might be the first step that somebody needs to take, is just, I've been kind of an outlier and I need to lean in a little bit more.
I was thinking, I made a list of stuff that it won't be brand new, but I think so what do we need to process about this? Because my brain just thinks about, okay, so I agree. I want to be happy. What am I doing that gets in the way of happiness? Not what is life doing that gets in the way?
Yeah.
What am I doing? One of them I just put down is people time instead of screen time. I've said a lot of times, it's easy to revert to relaxation, and relaxation becoming isolation.
Yes, sure.
And isolation then going, well, this isn't fueling my soul, but it's safe. And I think that might be sometimes what we have to guard ourselves against with happiness right now. Are you unhappy because you're protecting yourself? But you would say, well, I'm unhappy because I didn't protect myself and I got wounded by such and such. So I can't afford to be hurt like that anymore. I don't want to be unhappy like that, so I'm not going to do that, which means you are then making yourself unable to access happiness because it's connectedness.
Right.
It's like a cycle, right?
For sure.
And it sounds like the devil's work.
Yeah.
So people time instead of screen time.
Yep.
And then I'm going to add to that. So I need people time. No one calls me. No one texts me. Or I don't know what to do. Just reach out. We've got friends in our lives who are brilliant at reaching out to us. And I know you are especially brilliant at reaching out to other people. But that's the effect. That's the cause and effect. I'm saying that's, why are you together? Well, someone reached out.
When we've got to get over, because you and I talk about it sometimes, though, because I get fatigued and frankly just sad, though, because I am the one that often is the first to reach out. And in quiet moments, I'm like, why doesn't anybody reach out to me first? And I kind of get sad about it. And what I feel like the Lord consistently communicates to my heart is, it's okay to be the one that reaches out first. That
Yeah.
doesn't make you less, or that doesn't mean that people don't value you. That just means that that's your role in a lot of relationships. And that's okay, that I just feel compelled to do it. And if I feel compelled to do it and I don't do it because I don't want to be the first one to reach out, that becomes a lack of obedience to the way the Lord wired me and is pressing me to reach out. Like I end up in my selfishness or in my sadness. And I know there are a lot of people like that say, I'm just going to stop reaching out, and whoever doesn't reach to me, we're just done then. That just means we weren't good friends. And I don't think that's true, because I think everybody's by and large trying their best. And so don't buy the lie that you can't be the first to reach out. I think we do that, and then we isolate ourselves even more.
Makes me think of private conversations you and I have had where I'll ask you a question and I'll say, hey, should I say this to someone?
Yeah.
Because I'm processing my world, my circle, even though you and I are married, my circle's different than yours. Mm-hmm. And your circle's different than mine. Mm-hmm. What you and I do for a living, how you and I see the world. There's so much unity in that, mm-hmm. but there's also at the same time differences. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is there's things that whether I need to bring them all the time, I can get annoyed about bringing that all the time to our marriage or to other relationships, or realize perhaps because of how my circle works and the life that I see in the world that I view, maybe I see that. Mm-hmm. And you see things differently. So that's why I often ask, I don't do this myself because I sometimes don't have options to do that. Should I do this for someone else? And you'll often say, yes, you should. You should text that. You should say that. And
my dad always says, like when I was growing up and I'd go, should I write a letter to this person? They've just been on my mind. And I ask him, because then I'm going to ask him for money to buy a card and a stamp. And he says, if it's on your mind and it is not sinful, that is the Lord putting it on your heart. A person, something to do for someone, go do that and enjoy the blessing that the Lord will just give your heart for reaching out. And again, the enemy, I think, though, says no. You should wait. If people really love you, if you really matter to people, they'll reach out to you. And again, I say, even I think the last few years has perpetuated this. Not everybody is in a place where they can do that, even if they long to or need to or want to or are feeling pressed to. And so I will always say, if something is on your heart, reach out. And if no one comes to mind when you're like, man, who should I reach out to? Then spend time praying and asking the Lord for who that could be.
Makes me think, just because you don't need it, whatever it is, doesn't mean someone else doesn't need it. And just because you always have to do it, doesn't mean you should stop doing it.
Or something's wrong with you.
Yep.
I made a commitment a couple years ago. I write 10 notes a week. And I have just committed, like when the week starts, I just start praying. And sometimes it's Thursday and I haven't filled each of those 10. And sometimes I don't. I'm not rigid about it. But what it's done is it's given me this just gratitude for the people that the Lord has brought into my life. Some of them I know really well. Some of them I'm related to. Others I've just recently met. Or it could just be a thank you note for, somebody that I had a meeting with. But the same with text messaging. I've just made a point that if someone crosses my mind, I take a moment to pray for them and I reach out. And it is mind-blowing what the Lord does through those connections that seem so simple, but somebody might write back and go, oh man, I am not well right now. Or, oh, you know what? I've been meaning to reach out to you about volunteering or getting connected with this nonprofit. Or it's just amazing what God will do. But we buy the lie of isolation. You're so right. And I think that is connected because I think happiness, because I think culture just says it's something else. It makes it so shallow. But I think a life of meaning and purpose. Yeah.
And you can't be lazy. We just took the kids. We went to a high school basketball game, and on the drive home, why don't we do that more often? It's one of those things.
Yeah.
So I just think and we were happy and like, hey, that was a good time. It just shows you that life never stops at needing some work. It doesn't mean that life is always like plowing a field, but it just requires some work, some effort, and I think that's okay. And so to end this, I would like to officially rewrite the Declaration of Independence. So if you have a personal copy at your house, throw it away. And life, liberty, and the pursuit of being connected to God and others. I've rewritten the Declaration of Independence. Scrap the happiness. We need to be connected to God and to people, and that will solve the happiness problem.
That's good. I don't think legally you can do that. That's not binding.
President?
Yeah, you could try.
All right.
Good luck with that. I'm so happy for you.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for listening or watching to Thanks.
We're rusty. We're getting back into it.
For tuning in to another episode of Off the Fence. We love you so much. Have a happy day.
Go call somebody. Bye.